The joke that changed everything. The throne hall of the alien empire was huge, cold, and filled with tension. High pillars rose like dark spears. Banners of crimson and silver hung down, and the air carried the weight of hundreds of eyes staring. At the lone human who stood in the center, he felt small compared to the towering figures around him, but he stood tall because humanity had chosen him to represent Earth at this council. At the far end of the hall sat the alien queen. She was unlike any being he had ever seen tall. Elegant, her skin glowing faintly with a silver hue, and her crown shaped from living crystal that pulsed with soft light. Her eyes were sharp, cold, and carried the kind of power that could crush nations without lifting a hand. She was feared across the galaxy, called the Empress of Silence, and yet here she was, staring down at a human ambassador with curiosity. The alien courtiers whispered, their voices sharp with mockery. Why send a human? Some said, they are weak. Others hissed, they barely survived their own wars. What right do they have to stand here? Every word was designed to cut deep, but the human forced a calm smile, refusing to show fear. The queen finally spoke, her voice smooth yet heavy like steel. You are Earth's choice? One single man to speak for your entire species? Her tone carried both amusement and danger. The human swallowed, knowing that every word he said could decide humanity's place in the galaxy. He tried to answer carefully, but the silence and the mocking eyes made him nervous. The weight of the moment pressed down on him, his palms sweaty, his heart racing. He needed to break the tension, to show that humans were not just frightened children in the presence of giants. And so, without fully thinking, he spoke the words that would change everything. You'd make a cute wife, he said with a half smile. Trying to turn fear into humor, the hall froze. Every alien's head snapped toward him, eyes wide with shock, disbelief, even outrage. Gasps echoed against the stone walls, sharp and loud. The human himself felt his blood run cold. Had he really just said that to the most powerful ruler in the galaxy? For a moment, time stopped. The queen's face was unreadable, her expression frozen, her sharp eyes locked on him. The silence stretched so long, it felt like a blade against his throat. The courtiers began to murmur, their whispers now frantic. An insult. He dares mock her. End him. The human's heart pounded. He thought this was the end, that guards would drag him away, that Earth would pay the price for his foolish joke. But then something unexpected happened. The alien queen slowly leaned forward on her throne, her lips parting ever so slightly, and in a voice that carried across the hall, cold yet strangely soft, she said, I accept. The chamber erupted into chaos. Voices shouted, claws slammed against marble, weapons clattered as alien guards moved, unsure what to do. Nobles screamed in outrage. Others laughed in disbelief, and some even whispered ancient words of prophecy. But the queen raised one hand, and the entire hall fell silent once more. Her eyes never left the human. You dared speak what no one in this galaxy has ever spoken to me, she said, her voice steady. Others bow, others beg, but you joke, you risk death with words no one else would dare, and that is why I accept. The human stood frozen, unable to breathe, unable to even understand what had just happened. A simple nervous joke had turned into a declaration, one that could change the future of humanity forever. He wanted to laugh, to deny it, to say it was nothing. But he knew the court would never see it as a joke anymore. In their eyes, the queen had chosen him. The courtiers' rage boiled hotter. Some shouted that the queen had gone mad. Others swore this was manipulation, that humans had tricked her. But none dared challenge her directly, for her word was law, and to oppose her meant death. The queen's gaze softened just a fraction, only enough for him to notice. You have no idea what you've just done, she whispered so low only he could hear. But now you cannot turn back. His chest tightened, the weight of her words sinking in. It was not just a joke anymore. It was a bond, one that tied him to the most dangerous woman in the galaxy. And as the guards moved to escort him deeper into the palace, he realized something that made his stomach twist. He was no longer an ambassador. He was now the Queen's chosen consort, her husband in the eyes of the galaxy. And whether it was a game, a trap, or something far deeper, humanity would never be the same again. Asterisk the Queen's dangerous smile. The human walked behind two armored guards, their heavy footsteps echoing across the endless marble halls of the alien palace. He could still hear the words in his head, sharp and unreal. "I accept," the alien queen had said. And now the entire galaxy would see him not as an ambassador, but as something far stranger. His heart pounded with dread, but also with disbelief, because he had no control anymore. They led him to a smaller chamber filled with warm golden light, the air scented with strange flowers that glowed softly in crystal vases. The queen was already waiting, seated on a high chair shaped from black stone, her silver skin glowing under the light, her crown flickering with faint energy. The guards stepped aside, leaving him alone with her, the silence pressing down harder than the weight of the galaxy itself. "You should not look so pale. Human," she said, her lips curling into something that looked almost like a smile, but sharper, more dangerous. "In one sentence, you have shaken my entire empire." Her voice was calm, but her eyes glimmered with hidden fire. The human tried to speak, but his throat felt dry. I was only joking," he managed to say, his voice weak. The queen tilted her head slightly, as if studying prey that thought it could escape. "Joking?" she repeated, her tone amused. "In my court, words are blades, and you just cut deeper than any general's sword." He swallowed hard, realizing there was no way to explain his way out. The queen rose from her seat and walked toward him, her steps slow, deliberate, her gown trailing across the floor like liquid silver. When she stood close enough, he could feel the strange energy radiating from her body, sharp and heavy like static lightning. Her lips curved again, but this time her smile was colder. "You dared what no other dared," she whispered. "And now the entire galaxy believes I have chosen you." The human's heart raced. "Then, what happens now?" he asked, his voice shaking slightly, her eyes narrowed, her smile dangerous. "Now, you live or die, depending on how well you play the game," she said softly. She moved closer, so close he could see the faint shimmer of her silver eyelashes. "There are nobles in my empire who would see you dead before the sun rises," she continued, her voice calm. "They will whisper, they will bribe, they will send blades in the dark, because your presence threatens their power." Her words sent a chill down his spine. He wanted to protest, to demand freedom, to say he had no part in her schemes, but he knew it would be useless. Instead, he forced himself to stand taller, meeting her eyes. "Then why accept my words at all?" he asked, his voice steadier now. Her smile deepened, sharp as a knife. "Because," she said, "in your foolishness, you gave me the one thing I needed, an excuse." The chamber fell silent, only the sound of her gown brushing against the floor as she circled him like a predator. "For years, I have been hunted in my own court," she confessed, her tone low. "They smile to my face, but they carve daggers for my back. They demand I choose a mate, a king, a symbol of unity for my empire." Her hand lifted, a faint shimmer of power dancing across her fingers. "And then you, a human, mocked the very idea with no fear, no calculation, only honesty." Her eyes locked on his, fierce and unblinking. "That is why I said, 'I accept,'" she declared. "Not because I needed a husband, not because I cared for your joke, but because you gave me the weapon I could use against them." The human's chest tightened, the truth hitting him like a hammer. She was using him, not as a lover, not as a partner, but as a shield against the vultures in her empire. And yet, There was something else in her eyes, a flicker of loneliness, of exhaustion, hidden behind the steel mask of a queen. He took a slow breath, his mind racing. If he refused her, Earth could suffer. If he accepted her gain, he might not survive. The night, but as he looked at her dangerous smile, he realized something chilling. This was no longer just survival. It was war played with words, shadows, and blood. The queen leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper only he could hear. "Be careful, human," she said. "You may have saved yourself with your joke, but you have also painted a target. On your back." Her eyes glimmered like silver fire as she added, "And if you fall, humanity falls with you." The human felt the weight of her words crushing him. But in that moment, he also felt something strange defiance. Humans had always been underestimated, dismissed as weak, yet they had survived their own brutal history. And maybe, just maybe, he could survive this too. He clenched his fists, forcing a smile of his own, shaky but real. "Then let them come," he whispered. "Let them try." For the first time, the queen's smile shifted. Less sharp, more curious, almost approving. Perhaps she saw not just a pawn, but a piece that could change the board. And as the golden light flickered around them, the human knew his fate was sealed. This was no longer about a joke. It was about power, survival, and the beginning of a bond that could shake the galaxy itself. Asterisk. Whispers in the shadows. The palace at night was not silent. It breathed like a living beast, with hidden corridors, secret doors, and shadows that moved when no wind blew. The human walked carefully through the halls, always feeling eyes on his back even when the guards were gone. He knew the queen had spoken truth. Someone in this place wanted him dead. From the high windows, he could see the alien city glittering below. Towers of black stone and blue crystal stretched toward the stars, their lights cold and sharp. This was not Earth, not home, and yet, somehow, his single joke had tied humanity's future to this empire. He felt the weight of every human life pressing on his shoulders. Whispers followed him wherever he went. Servants bowed but spoke behind his back. Nobles stared with venom in their eyes, their voices low, but their hatred sharp enough to cut. "An insult to our queen," they murmured. "A parasite from Earth," they sneered. "A pawn who will not survive the week," they promised. One evening, as he walked back from the great library of the palace, he turned a corner and froze. Two alien courtiers stood in the shadows, their voices hushed but clear enough to hear. "The queen has lost her mind," one hissed. "She cannot bind herself to a human. The council will not allow it." The other replied, "They will act quietly, before sunrise." His blood ran cold. They were planning to kill him, and maybe even strike at the queen herself. He slipped away before they noticed him. His mind racing, he had to warn her. But he also knew that running to her like a frightened child would only show weakness. If he wanted to survive, he needed to understand the game first. Later that night, the queen summoned him. She sat alone in her private chamber, no guards, no courtiers, only her and the human. The room was dimly lit, the walls lined with silver firestones that gave off a soft glow. Her crown rested beside her on a table, and for the first time she looked less like a queen and more like a woman. "Carrying too much weight. You've heard them, haven't you?" she said, her voice low. He hesitated, then nodded. "Yes," he answered. "They want me dead." Her lips curved in a faint smile, but her eyes carried no amusement. "They always want me dead," she said. "Now they only want you too." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Why not deny it? Tell them it was a joke. Tell them I mean nothing." Her gaze snapped to his, fierce and unyielding. "Because weakness feeds wolves, and I will not feed them," she said firmly. "If I deny you now, I show them I can be forced to bend, and once I bend, I break." He clenched his fists, realizing how deep into her world he had fallen. Her empire was not built on love or trust, but on fear, power, and endless battles in the shadows. And now he was part of it, whether he wanted to be or not. She leaned forward, her silver eyes narrowing. "Tell me, human," she asked, "why do you think I keep you alive?" He froze at the question, unsure of the right answer. "Because I gave you a weapon," he said slowly. "My joke gave you a reason." Her dangerous smile returned, sharper this time. "Correct," she whispered, "but not the full truth." She stood, walking past him, her voice echoing softly through the chamber. "For years I have been alone on this throne," she said. "Every suitor sees only a crown. Every noble sees only power to steal. But you looked at me and saw something else, even if it was foolish." She turned back to him, her eyes softer now, almost human. "You saw me as a woman." His breath caught, the weight of her words sinking deep. But before he could answer, loud crash echoed through the chamber. The doors burst open, and 3 cloaked assassins stormed in, blades glinting in the silver light. The human stumbled back as the queen moved faster than he could see. Her hand lifted, and a wave of pure energy exploded across the room, slamming one assassin into the wall. The others charged, their alien weapons burning with strange fire. The human grabbed a fallen dagger from the floor, holding it clumsily but refusing to stand idle. One assassin lunged at him, their blades swinging down. He ducked, slashed wildly, and by sheer luck cut deep into the assassin's side, sending them crashing to the ground. The queen finished the last attacker with a blast of power that shook the chamber. When the dust settled, the human stood panting, blood on his hands, his chest heaving. The queen looked at him, her silver eyes burning brighter than ever. "You fight," she whispered, almost surprised. "You are no warrior, no general, and yet you fight." He swallowed hard, his grip tight on the dagger. "I told you," he said, his voice steady despite his fear. "Let them come." The queen stepped closer, her smile dangerous, but softer than before. For the first time, she looked at him not as a pawn, not as a shield, but as something far more dangerous and equal. And in that moment, as the shadows of the dead assassins faded into silence, the human knew he had crossed a line. He was no longer just a joke. He was part of her war, her throne, and her destiny. Blood. In the court morning light filled the palace, but it did not bring peace. The assassination in the queen's private chamber had shaken the empire, yet the whispers in the court only grew louder. They spoke of betrayal, madness, and weakness, their words dripping with venom. The human knew that every glance in the corridors carried hidden threats. Every bow from a noble might hide a knife. The queen summoned her council that day. The grand hall blazed with banners and golden fire. Nobles seated in high rows, their jeweled eyes gleaming with greed and fury. The human was forced to stand. At her side, his presence like a spark thrown into dry grass. Every noble's gaze burned with hate, as if they wished to tear him apart where he stood. The queen entered last, her crown glowing with living crystal, her gown trailing silver fire across the polished floor. She walked with power, but the human could sense her tension hidden beneath the mask. This was no ordinary council. This was war dressed in ceremony. The eldest noble, a tall alien with scales of black stone, rose to speak. "Your Majesty," his voice thundered, "your actions shame this throne. You bind yourself to a human, an animal unworthy of our blood." The hall erupted with shouts, claws striking the tables, voices hissing. "Cast him out," they demanded. "End this insult," they cried. The human stood frozen, the pressure crushing his chest. He wanted to shout, to defend himself, but one wrong word could doom Earth forever. The queen raised her hand, the hall falling into silence at once. Her eyes glowed silver, cold and merciless. "You question me?" she asked softly, but her words struck like blades. Then watch what happens to those who forget who rules. As if on cue, the doors burst open. A group of armored assassins stormed into the hall, their weapons glowing with red fire. The nobles gasped, some pretending to be shocked, but the humans saw the truth in their faces. This attack was no surprise. It was a plan. The assassins charged straight for him. Blades aimed to cut him down in front of the court. Time slowed. The human's heart pounded as one assassin's blade swung toward his chest. But before it struck, the queen moved. Her power exploded like a storm, a wave of silver energy sweeping across the chamber. Assassins were thrown like broken dolls against stone pillars, their screams echoing before silence returned. The hall trembled with shock. The queen stood tall, her hands still raised, her eyes burning brighter than fire. Then her voice rang out like thunder, echoing through the chamber. "No one touches what is mine." The nobles flinched, their whispers dying into silence. The words carried more than fury. They carried claim, power, and danger. The human felt the weight of those words crash down on him. She had just declared him hers before the entire empire. The assassins lay broken, their blood staining the polished floor. The queen stepped down from her throne, her gown trailing through the crimson, unbothered by the sight. She looked at the nobles, her smile sharp as a blade. "You think to break me with shadows?" she asked, her voice calm but heavy with threat. "You send blades into my court? You dare test my throne? Then hear this, your schemes have failed, and now the human you despise will stand beside me, protected by my hand, by my crown, by my empire." The chamber shuddered under her words. Some nobles lowered their heads, trembling. Others bit their tongues in rage, but none dared speak against her. The human stood frozen, his mind racing. What had begun as a careless joke was now a throne claim, sealed in blood, and though he had no crown, no power of his own, the queen had placed him at the center of her empire's storm. After the council was dismissed, the queen led him back through the quiet halls, her face unreadable, her steps calm, but her hand brushed lightly against his as they walked. "You see now," she whispered, her voice low so only he could hear. "They will not stop. Every day you remain by my side, more daggers will rise in the dark, more shadows will move. To end you." He looked at her, fear mixing with defiance in his chest. "Then why keep me here?" he asked, his voice unsteady. She stopped, turning to face him, her silver eyes sharp yet burning with something deeper. "Because you remind me what it means to fight," she said softly, "and because I do not want to be alone anymore." Her words struck him harder than the chaos of the council. Behind the dangerous queen was a woman who had carried the weight of a throne for too long. And though he knew the galaxy wanted him dead, some part of him now understood he could not walk away. Not from her, not from this, not from what they had begun. The palace torches flickered as the night returned. Shadows still whispered of rebellion. Blood still stained the marble, but the queen's words echoed in his mind. "No one touches what is mine." And for the first time, the human realized he was no longer a visitor in her empire. He was a part of it, a piece of its power, and perhaps its most dangerous weapon. A queen's confession. The night after the bloodshed in the council hall was heavy with silence. Palace guards patrolled with sharper eyes, their weapons ready, but even they looked shaken by what had happened. The human sat alone in his chamber, staring at his hands, the faint stains of blood still etched into his memory. He had come here as an ambassador, a voice for peace, and yet now he stood at the center of a storm he never asked for. A knock echoed against the heavy door. Before he could answer, the queen herself entered, her silver gown flowing like starlight, her crown absent from her head. For the first time, she looked less like the ruler of an empire, and more like a woman who carried the weight of galaxies on her shoulders. "You should rest," she said quietly, her voice softer than he had ever heard. He rose, meeting her eyes with uncertainty. Rest? He asked, his tone bitter. When assassins hide in every shadow? When the entire corp wants me dead? Her lips curved faintly, though it was not quite a smile. You begin to understand what it means to wear a crown, she whispered. She stepped further into the room, the door closing behind her. I did not come to speak of death, she continued. I came to speak of you. Her words struck him, confusing and sharp. He frowned, unsure what game she was playing. You risked everything when you choked. With me, she said, her silver eyes watching him closely. You did not bow. You did not flatter. You did not tremble the way others do. You dared to see me differently. The human swallowed, unsure how to respond. I wasn't trying to be brave, he admitted. I was terrified. I just wanted to break the tension. The Queen's lips curved into a dangerous but softer smile. And yet, it worked. She said. She turned away from him, walking toward the window that overlooked the alien city. The towers glowed faintly under the twin moons, their lights reflected in her shimmering skin. For a long moment, she stood in silence, as though weighing her next words carefully. Then she spoke, her voice quieter, more fragile. I have rejected hundreds of suitors, she said slowly. Kings, generals, lords of entire star systems. All of them knelt, all of them swore loyalty, but none of them saw me. Her words hung heavy in the room. The human stepped closer, unsure if he should speak. You are the Queen, he said softly. How could they not see you? She turned her head, her eyes catching his, and in them he saw something he never expected: loneliness. They saw a crown, she whispered, not a woman. His chest tightened at her words. She had ruled through fear, through strength. But under it all, she had been alone, surrounded by enemies who wanted her throne, allies who only wanted power. And now, one foolish human's careless joke had broken that mask. You called me cute, she said, her lips curving faintly again. But this time not with danger. No one has dared speak to me like that in my entire reign. Do you understand? No one. Her voice shook just slightly, enough for him to know how deeply it had struck her. He felt his throat tighten, his own fear mixing with something else, something he could not quite name. I didn't mean to insult you, he said. Softly, her gaze sharpened, though her voice was steady. You didn't insult me, she said. You reminded me I am still more than a throne, more than a symbol of power. The human stood silent, the weight of her confession pressing on him. Before he could answer, a sudden sound broke the moment, the distant echo of steel clashing, shouts muffled by stone walls. The Queen's head snapped toward the door, her eyes narrowing with cold fury. They move faster than I expected, she muttered, her voice now sharp again. The softness gone, she turned back to him, her expression unreadable. This is no longer about you or... she said, her voice steady with command. The rebellion grows bolder. And tonight they may strike at the heart of my palace. Her eyes locked onto his, fierce and unyielding. If you stand with me, human, you will not be a joke. You will not be a pawn. You will be my shield, my blade, my chosen. His chest tightened, fear and determination colliding in his veins. He knew the danger. He knew that standing with her meant painting an even larger target on his back. But he also knew he could not walk away now, not after seeing the truth behind her mask, not after hearing the loneliness hidden in her voice. He nodded slowly, his voice steady. Then I stand with you. For a moment, her dangerous smile returned, but this time it carried warmth beneath the sharpness. Good, she whispered, because together we may yet survive what comes next. Outside, the palace trembled with shouts and the clash of steel. The rebellion was not waiting. The human tightened his fists, ready for whatever storm was coming, and as the Queen stood by his side, her silver eyes burning with fire, he realized the truth. This was no longer about survival. This was about destiny, a bond born from a joke, but sharpened in blood and fire. Asterisk the trial of fire. The palace shook with the roar of the crowd. The great arena of the empire had been lit for the first time in years. Its massive stone walls carved with ancient runes, its sands stained with the blood of forgotten warriors. Thousands of nobles filled the seats, their voices rising like thunder, hungry for a spectacle, hungry for death, and at the center of it all stood the human, alone on the sand. The queen had warned him the night before. "The rebellion demands proof," she said, her silver eyes burning with fury. "They claim our bond is a lie, that you are nothing more than a weak joke who hides behind my throne. They want blood, human blood, to show the galaxy your weakness." Her hand had rested on his shoulder, her voice low and steady. "But if you survive this, no one will ever question us again." Now, standing under the burning suns, the human felt the weight of her words. His heart pounded as he looked. Across the arena, where the gates began to rise, chains rattling as massive doors opened, the crowd erupted in cheers as 3 alien champions stepped onto the sand, each one towering, armored, and carrying weapons that gleamed with deadly light. One had blades like hooked claws, another carried a hammer crackling with lightning, and the third, a beast of muscle and steel, roared with a voice that shook the ground. The human had no armor, no great weapon, only a short blade placed in his hand. He knew the truth. This was not a trial of fairness. It was an execution dressed as honor. The nobles wanted to see him broken, bleeding, his corpse proof that the queen's choice was folly. High above, the queen sat on her throne of black stone. Her gaze fixed on him, she showed no fear, no emotion. But her fingers tightened on the arm of her seat. She could not intervene, not here. Not in the ancient trial. This was his test, his survival, his chance to prove humanity's worth. The first champion struck like a storm, his hooked blades flashing in the sun's light. The human barely rolled aside, the blades carving the sand. Where his chest had been, he scrambled to his feet, swinging clumsily, his short blade scraping against alien armor. The crowd laughed, voices filled with scorn. "Pathetic," they shouted. "End him quickly," they demanded. But the human did not fall. Every strike he dodged, every stumble he turned into a chance to stay alive. He had no strength compared to them, no training with alien weapons, but he had something else: desperation, cunning, and the stubborn refusal to die. The second champion charged, his massive hammer crushing down. The sand exploded, the shockwave nearly throwing the human off his feet. He staggered, his ears ringing, but he saw the flaw when the hammer struck. It took time to lift again. He lunged forward, driving his blade into the champion's leg. The alien roared in fury, stumbling back as blood sprayed across the sand. The crowd gasped, their laughter turning to uneasy silence. The human had drawn first blood, but the third champion moved, faster than the others, a beast of muscle and steel, its claws slashing toward him, its roar shaking the air. The human raised his blade, but the force was too strong. The weapon flew from his hand. He fell to the ground, the beast towering above him, ready to rip him apart. At that moment, something strange happened. The queen rose from her throne, her eyes blazing. She did not speak, but her presence alone silenced the crowd. Her gaze locked on him, and for a heartbeat, he felt her strength like fire in his chest. He rolled aside as the beast's claws struck the ground, grabbing a jagged shard of broken stone from the sand. With a roar of his own, he drove the stone into the beast's throat. The creature gurgled, stumbling back, its blood staining the arena floor. Before collapsing into the dust, the human stood panting, his body bruised, his hands bleeding, but still alive. The champions lay broken around him, the silence of the arena deafening. Then, slowly, the crowd began to rise, their voices uncertain, some shouting in disbelief, others roaring in rage, But none could deny what they had seen. The queen raised her hand, her voice cutting through the chaos like thunder. "Look well," she commanded, her words echoing across the arena. "This is the human you mocked, the one you called weak. Yet he stands while your champions fall. He bleeds, but he does not bow." Asterisk. The nobles shifted uneasily, their schemes crumbling under the weight of her words. The human lifted his head, meeting her gaze, and for the first time, he saw something in her eyes he had never seen before. Pride. She stepped forward, her voice ringing clear. "He is mine," she declared, "and together we are unbroken." The arena shook with her words, the crowd torn between fear and awe. The rebellion would not end here. But the message had been carved in blood and fire. Humanity was no longer a joke, and he was no longer just an ambassador. He was a warrior in the eyes of the galaxy, bound to the most dangerous queen of all. Asterisk the queen's eternal choice. The arena floor still carried the stench of blood and fire. The human stood trembling, his chest heaving, his arms bruised and cut. Yet he remained upright. The three alien champions lay broken behind him, their defeat etched into the sand for all to see. And above it all, the queen rose from her throne, her silver eyes burning brighter than the sun's. The nobles shouted in fury, their voices a storm of disbelief. "This is a trick," they cried. "No human can triumph over champions of our blood." They hissed, but their words faltered against the truth of what they had witnessed. The queen raised her hand, and silence fell like a blade. Her gaze swept across the sea of nobles, her voice sharp and steady. "You doubted him," she said. "You mocked him. You tried to end him, but he stands while your chosen fall. What greater proof do you require?" The crowd shifted uneasily, the sound of claws against stone echoing in the silence. The human lifted his head, meeting her gaze. For a heartbeat, it was as though only the two of them existed, their bond forged in fire and blood. The queen stepped forward, her gown trailing silver sparks across the sand. She stopped beside him, her presence like a storm pressing against the entire arena. Then her voice rang out, strong enough to shake the walls. "Hear me, Empire. Hear me, Galaxy. Hear me, enemies and allies alike," she declared. This human spoke a joke that dared to touch the untouchable. "He looked at me not as a throne, not as a crown, but as a woman. And for that I chose him?" Gasps erupted from the nobles, some in outrage, some in awe, but she did not stop. Her voice only grew stronger. "You think him weak, but he has endured your blades, your assassins, your champions, and still he stands." Her hand lifted, resting lightly on his shoulder. "You will remember this moment, for today I declare before all he is mine." The words shook him too. His core, the human felt the weight of her claim press upon him. Heavier than any blade, the galaxy would no longer see him as just a man, but as the queen's chosen, the consort of the most feared ruler in the stars. Yet, as he looked into her eyes, he realized it was no longer a game of survival. Something deeper had begun between them, something even the court could not deny. The nobles rose in protest, their voices like thunder. "This cannot be," one roared. "He is an outsider," another shouted. But the queen raised her hand, silver fire burning from her fingers, silencing them all. "Speak again, and you. Die where you stand," she hissed, her voice dripping with command. The human took a slow breath, his body trembling but his spirit unbroken. He looked out at the endless sea of alien faces, all staring, all waiting. He had never wanted this, never asked for it. But now he knew walking away was impossible. He was tied to her, to this throne, to this destiny, and his voice carried as he whispered, "Then let them come." The queen's lips curved into a smile sharp, dangerous, yet filled with pride. She turned to the court, her voice ringing once more. "Together we will not bow. Together we will not break. Together We will rule, and the galaxy will learn a truth they have long forgotten. Her silver eyes gleamed as she spoke the final words. Humanity is not weak. The crowd erupted in chaos, some roaring with fear, others with awe. The rebellion's whispers crumbled, the empire shaken to its core. The human and the queen stood side by side, bloodied, battered, but unbroken, and as the twin suns dipped low, casting long shadows across the arena, the galaxy knew it had witnessed the birth of something new. What began as a careless joke had become a vow, a bond sharper than steel, stronger. Then fear, forged in defiance, concealed with fire. The queen's eternal choice was made. The human was no longer a stranger, no longer an ambassador, no longer just a man who dared to joke with power. He was her chosen, her shield, her consort, and perhaps her equal. The galaxy would tremble at the sound of her words. No one touches. What is mine, she had declared, and now, with the human by her side, the future of two species had been rewritten forever. Asterisk.